Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So my name is Thibault Moraine, and I speak on behalf of SLE Chemicals, our distributor in Germany. I come from company Evercare, and we are a producer of zinc oxide. And so that's why today I'm going to talk to you about formulations with zinc oxide and how to keep the delicate balance between performance, transparency on the one hand, and also safety. So let's start with zinc oxide in cosmetic formulations and why you would like to work with zinc oxides. There are a lot of reasons why our customers choose for zinc oxides. One of them is, of course, the broadband protection. You can use zinc oxide as a unique filter in a product. You have the global approval, so it's a worldwide approved filter. It's the fact that it's like titanium dioxide, it's a non-penetrating filter, so it stays on the skin, it's safe. There are the additional properties of zinc oxide, such as the soothing effect, and that's what you also have in this nappy cream in the babies. That's why they put zinc oxide in it. The naturality, of course, because it's a Cosmos product, well, in most of the cases. Another interesting aspect of zinc oxide is the boosting properties. When you combine zinc oxide together with other types of filters, such as chemical filters, then when you combine them, what the effect you get is more than just the sum of the two effects. So that's the boosting effect. Another advantage is the photostability, of course, and last but not least, you can use it in a wide range of applications, such as, of course, sunscreens, but also powders. We have customers using it, BB creams, we have deodorants, etc., etc. So that is, there are a lot of reasons why using zinc oxides, and there are some things that you should be careful about when formulating with zinc oxide. First, if you want to use zinc oxide as a UV filter, be sure to choose a UV attenuation grade, so do not choose a pigment grade. Should be a pharma grade zinc oxide, especially if you want to work with the USA. You have to be aware that there is a wide range of coating available, and you will have to choose if you want to work with a powder or with a dispersion. There will be also questions that you have to be careful about when looking at your supplier. What is the capacity, of course? Where is he based? Is he based in Europe? Well, you know all the problems of supply issues that exist in the world for the moment. And so the access to the raw material will be also very important. And last but not least, especially for customers who have not worked intensively with zinc oxide in the past, you have to look for a supplier that is able to support you in terms of regulatory knowledge, formulation support. Is there a lab? If you have a technical issue, can you seek for help? And marketing support as well. Here, for instance, you can see our Positive Reef Initiative logo that our customers can use as part of their marketing campaign. So these are all the things that you have to be careful. But that was the introductory part of my presentation. Now, what I really wanted to talk about today with you was what are the problems that you can encounter when formulating with zinc oxide. And these are perceived challenges because they are all solvable. And so I grouped them into three different groups. The first one is the testing. And you have a problem of correlation between in vitro and in vivo testing. And Jean-Claude Thibault already talked about that yesterday, so I will not go into too much detail on that topic because I only have half an hour. And I will concentrate mainly on the two other groups, which are formulating issues. And when you are formulating with zinc oxide, you can have stability problems, you can have performance problems, you can end up with a product that is a little bit too white for your skin, and you can have poor SPF performance. So these are the main commonly perceived problems linked with zinc oxide, and these are not problems that you have to have. So there are solutions to all of these problems. The second group, it's a very, very hot topic for the moment, the ecological impact. What is the impact of zinc oxide on specifically corals? And so that is the second part I would like to review with you today. But let's start with the formulating problems. So what you want to be careful about when formulating with zinc oxide, you will have the global, I'm calling this global performance of your formula. And when I'm talking about performance, I mean as well SPF performance, but I'm also talking about stability, cosmetic aspect, etc., etc. So the global performance of your formula will be depending on some elements that are present in the rest of the formula and some elements that are really zinc oxide based. So let's look at the formula-dependent elements. So you have, of course, the choice of the formula, whether you want to work with an oil-in-water formula or water-in-oil, can bring very different results. Anhydrous or a solid formula. All these different choices of formulas have their own advantages and drawbacks in terms of SPF performance and in terms of cosmetology. The type of emollient you're going to use will also have a big impact because of the rheology it has. It can make you a thicker film, which can have an impact on the SPF, but also some emollients have intrinsic absorption properties. And so this will also can have also an impact on your SPF, for instance. And the last thing is about film forming. That is an extremely important aspect of your formula. As you know, when your water evaporates, if you're working with an oil-in-water or water-in-oil, what is important is that you have a very homogeneous film without any holes. And so the dynamics of water evaporation will be very important. Whether you're working with a film former or not will have all very important impact on the performance of your sunscreen. And then you have all the really zinc oxide specific aspects that will have an impact on your formula. And the first one is, of course, the choice of zinc oxide. The choice of zinc oxide that you will make will depend on the shape of the particle of zinc oxide, its size distribution, and the coating. This will all have an impact on your formula. How well you disperse this zinc oxide into your oil phase. We are talking about really the mechanical dispersion in the oil, but also after that, making sure that it's stable in this dispersed state. And then the last aspect will be, I called it boosters, but it's performance-enhancing additives that are well correlated with zinc oxide, and that will depend on how these boosters work. And we only have half an hour again, so I had to choose. I'm only going to talk, of course, about zinc oxide specific topics. And let's start with the choice of the zinc oxide. So I'm taking as an example our portfolio of zinc oxides, of course, because that's the one I know best. And so you can see we have three different grades, Ano 10, 20, and M. And even if the shapes are similar, they are still very different. And so the properties will be different in terms of SPF performance and in terms of UVA absorption. And that will have a big impact in your end formula. Just by choosing one zinc oxide or another, will have an impact on your SPF, on your UVA properties, and if you are looking at blue light, that could also be interesting, they will have very different blue light performances as well. So choosing a right zinc oxide will have an impact on the performance, and it will also have an impact on the transparency. I'm not sure if you see that well, but so these three grades of zinc oxide, 20, 10, and M, were spread out on the arm of my colleague. I thank her for that, so that you could see the difference in whitening effect. So that is also explained, if you look at the curve, you will see that after 400 nanometers, the Zano M is much higher in absorption curve than the two others, and so that is why you have a much more whitening effect. So the choice of zinc oxide will have impact on performance and transparency, but what is also important to take into consideration will be the coating. Why would you want to work with a coated zinc oxide? The zinc oxide will be a hydrophobic coating, will ensure the stability of your zinc oxide, I'm sorry, it goes alone, will ensure the stability of your dispersion into the oil phase, and it will avoid the agglomeration of the particles together, so that will, of course, have a big impact on the performance and also on the whitening. What you have to look at is how well the coating is bonded to the particle. Is this a chemically bonded coating, like tritoxycapryl silane in this case? You have some stearic acid coatings that are not chemically bonded, but that will play the same role. And you have to look also at the naturality. Not every coating is as natural as the other. The second aspect when looking at zinc oxide-based formula is really the quality of the dispersion. And that will be the main driver of your performance of your zinc oxide, whether you're looking at SPF or you're looking at stability. The dispersion's quality will have a big impact on, like I said, the stability, the sensorial properties, because you will have a good dispersion of small particles everywhere, so that will improve the transparency and then sensorial performance. But it will also ensure that you have enough particles well spread out in your film so that all the UV light is absorbed. You can choose whether you want to work with a readily made dispersions, and there are a lot of dispersion producers on the market, or you could also decide to work with a powder. Both have advantages and drawbacks. I would say the biggest advantage of the dispersion, the readily made dispersion, is the ease of use. So it's done, you just have to pour it, and you don't have to do anything with it. You do not have to work with dust in your production, so that is also an advantage. And because most of the problems that you can have in your final formula come from the dispersion, you are sure about the quality of the product that you're pouring into your formula. So you have a control over the quality. The advantages of the powder is, the biggest one I would say is the price. Of course, if you're purchasing the powder directly, you have a more price interesting property. You also have flexibility. If you decide that you want your own mix of different blends of powders, you can mix them like you want, and you have your unique powder. And also you have the complete control over your inky list, because when you purchase dispersion, you purchase the zinc oxide, but also the dispersing aid and also the oil, of course. But whatever the choice, it is possible to obtain the same performance with both the powder and the dispersion, provided you have the good equipment. So that will be very important to take that into consideration, the equipment that you have. So the main important thing to create a good dispersion, I would say, is to use a dispersing aid. The dispersing aid will coat the zinc oxide and prevent agglomeration. And the best example is to compare 30% CCT oil, 30% Zano in the CCT oil. You see that it's very, very thick paste, almost like cement. And 50% of the same Zano in the same CCT oil with the dispersing oil, you see the dispersing aid, you see that you have a very liquid and easy to work with dispersion. So why is it so important to use the dispersing aid? So, like I said, the dispersing aid will go around the zinc oxide and coat it inside your oil phase, which will prevent agglomeration, we saw that on the picture, but also ensure the stability of the zinc oxide in your oil phase. What you want to make sure of is that your zinc oxide stays in the oil phase and does not migrate to the water phase. The second thing that it will be good for, if you use a dedicated dispersing aid, is that if you don't use one, your emulsifier will play that role. So you might also have some liquid formula because of your emulsifier that will coat the zinc oxide, but in this case, you will not have enough emulsifier anymore to stabilize your emulsion, so it will consume your emulsifier. And also, the emulsifier being a bridge between the oil and the water phase, you have the risk that your emulsifier drags the zinc oxide really to the water phase, which is what you really want to avoid. Because if your zinc oxide ends up in the water phase, part of it will dissolve into zinc ions, Zn2+ ions, which will increase the pH in your formula. So you can have a pH drift. So what are the recommended dispersing aids? So for esters and oil, we recommend to work with polyhydroxysteric acid. And for silicones, we recommend to work with PEG-10 dimeticones or other PEG-PPG oils. So the last important thing when creating a right dispersion will be to put enough energy into creating the right vortex to ensure the good spreading of the particles in your oil phase. So once you have your dispersion, what you want to make sure of is that it will also keep stable. And to keep a good and stable dispersion, it is important to make sure that your dispersing aid that you put in your oil phase has the possibility to play its role. And so that is why we always recommend to follow a specific order of addition and to first put the polyhydroxysteric acid with the zinc oxide alone, create your dispersion, and only afterwards put the rest of your oil phase ingredients to avoid the interactions I talked about with emulsifier or other oil phase ingredients. The second important thing will be to use the optimum levels of polyhydroxysteric acids. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you this is the optimum level because the optimum level will depend on your oil, will depend on the polyhydroxysteric acid that you use, and also of the grade of zinc oxide that you use. On average, we see that around 1 to 5 parts of PHSA per 100 parts of zinc oxide is a good average. But what we say is that it's important to make scale studies to know what your own optimum is. That is very important. The last part of the zinc oxide specific aspect is the boosters. Because if you work with zinc oxide alone, just zinc oxide in the formula, so you have to know that 1% of zinc oxide brings around 1.5 points of SPF. So when you work with 25% zinc oxide, which is the maximum limit allowed here in Europe, you can reach 35, maybe 40. And that is the maximum you will be able to reach. But we all know that it's not enough. So you need to also be able to produce SPF 50 in your range. And so what you want to do is combine your zinc oxide with something else that will allow you to go higher. And this something else can be either titanium dioxide, that is used a lot or was used a lot, because these are the two mineral filters, titanium dioxide, zinc oxide. They are very complementary because zinc oxide is broadband UVA, UVB filter. Titanium dioxide is very strong on the SPF. So by combining them, you can get high SPF and good UVA protection. The drawback of titanium dioxide is the bad image it has for the moment, specifically in Europe and in France, because of its impact on the human health. And the second big drawback is because of the high refractive index of the titanium dioxide. If you combine these two powders, in most of the cases you will have very whitening formulas, which is not very well accepted anymore in the market, even for natural cosmetics. The second option you have is to work with chemical filters. Like I explained earlier, this can be very interesting because of the boosting effect. But it depends what you want to formulate. Sometimes if you're in the natural cosmetics, you cannot use chemical filters. And the performance you will get will depend very much on the absorption curve of your chemical filter. So the last possibility is the use of boosters. And the boosters, there are a lot of different boosters that have a lot of different effects. And depending on the booster you will choose, you will have a small or big boosting effect in combination with zinc oxide. So you have to know the mode of action and the characteristics of the booster. And I'm giving you one example. It's the booster that we are promoting is Assure Plus. So that's a Cosmos booster coming from the Pongamia tree. It's Pongamia pinnata seed extract that is totally natural. And what is interesting is it absorbs both in the UVB and in the UVA range. So when you combine that with zinc oxide, what you see is that you always get a boosting effect of around 10 points. You can see that in our formula with Zano 10 plus there on the right, you get a 32 with 20% Zano 10 plus, which is very coherent with what you can expect. And when you add the 0.25% of Assure Plus, you get 45. And that is very coherent with everything we tested. And what you can also see is that you have an increase in the critical wavelength going from 371 to 374. That is because the UVA is also boosted, of course. And so we tested that in vivo on one formula that we had developed a few years ago, but we had sun spheres in there. So you know sun spheres is microplastics. So we removed the 5% sun spheres and replaced them with 0.25% of the Assure Plus. And we tested this formula in vitro and in vivo, and we got SPF 58 in vivo with, of course, all the ratio passed and the critical wavelengths of 374 nanometer. What is very interesting with this specific booster is the low usage needed. So it has no impact on the cosmetics of the formula. Sorry. And also it's interesting in terms of cost impact on the formula, of course, to use a small amount. So it is possible to reach SPF 50 with zinc oxide only formulas. You have to work a little bit on your formula to find a good performing booster, but it's possible to do that. So let's now talk about the second group, the ecological impact of zinc oxide-based sunscreens, and making sense of contradictory information you have in the market for the moment. So if you are looking at corals, for instance, we all know that corals are extremely important for the biodiversity of the oceans, but that they are dying at an extremely fast and alarming range. We all know that the main cause of the coral death is, of course, the global warming, but still there is a lot of media attention on sun filters, so, especially since Hawaii banned a lot of chemical filters. A lot of media attention has been brought on sunscreens, and most of the sunscreen brands are now paying attention on their impact on the corals, specifically, and on aquatic toxicity as a whole. And when you look at this, looking at zinc oxide, it's very complicated to understand exactly what is the impact of zinc oxide. Indeed, when you look at the information you find, on the one hand, you see that zinc oxide is GRACE, so generally regarded as safe and efficient by the FDA. It is promoted as the best alternative to chemical filters. Even it's the only filter allowed in Hawaii, together with titanium dioxide. And so you have the impression that zinc oxide is the solution to these problems of chemical filters attacking corals. On the other hand, when looking this up on internet, for instance, you can see that zinc oxide can cause cause damage to corals, and that it is ecotoxic. There are some studies that show that zinc oxide is also bleaching corals, and zinc oxide has been classified by the European Chemical Agency as an ecotoxic hazard for aquatic environment. So, especially as an end consumer, you're like, what is it in the end? What is the reality? And that is what we wanted to explain here. And the solution, in our opinion, is to go from a hazard profile to a risk analysis. And so, what you need to understand first is what is happening when you put zinc oxide in the water. What is the hazard profile of the zinc oxide? What concentrations does it become toxic? And what is called the PNEX, predicted no effect concentrations. So that means below these concentrations, we know that nothing happens, and as from these concentrations, there starts to be a toxic effect. And so first you need to understand the material and understand all of these aspects. And then the second step will be to go to a risk assessment. What is the risk that we reach indeed these levels where it starts to become toxic, especially when you use zinc oxide in sunscreens? And so let's review this very superficially together, because we don't have the time to go into too much detail. But if you look at the hazard profile of zinc oxide, we are very lucky because it's very well defined. It has been studied for a long time. And so what we know is that when you plunge zinc oxide in the water, there is a dissolution of zinc oxide into zinc ions, Zn2 plus ions. And in this form, these zinc ions can be toxic for the environment. the concentrations are very well characterized. So the PNEC levels, the predicted no effect concentration levels, were determined for freshwater and seawater, so at 14.4 microgram per liter and 7.2 microgram per liter for seawater. So it's important to remember these values and to remember that these are really conservative values. That's also written in the European Chemical Agency. So if we are below these values, we are sure that nothing happens. But these values, the fact that they exist, is also the reason for the ecotoxical hazard labeling of the zinc oxide. And so what we now did is we looked at the existing literature and where they have analyzed the water on baths in Marseille, for instance, Ibiza, to measure the zinc oxide concentrations, to see what is the real concentration of zinc oxide in these waters. But also we worked with a consultant called Arch Consulting, who is working with REACH, with the European Union, to define these. It's really their work to do this risk analysis to see where, at what moment there starts to be a risk for the environment. And we have asked them, what is the risk if everybody uses zinc oxide sunscreens and it all washes away in the seawater? Is there a risk that we reach these levels? And so their conclusion was, first, that the predicted exposure concentration is 2.4 microgram per liter. So even in the worst case scenario, we will remain well below the 7.2 microgram per liter where it starts to have an effect. But also very interestingly is to see that the contribution of the zinc oxide in the sunscreens is only 0.82 microgram per liter. The rest is zinc that is naturally present in seawater. So that is the base on which you can understand now that zinc oxide is indeed can be considered as a hazard, but there is no risk in using zinc oxide in your sunscreens. So these are well below the PNEC values, and these are also in line, so these extrapolation are also in line with the scientific measurements, the real-life measurements that were done on the beaches. And this whole explanation is part of what we call the Positive Reef Initiative that I showed you earlier. The Positive Reef Initiative, you can see it's this coral logo with 3 waves around it. And the first wave is this in-depth understanding and explaining of the impact of zinc oxide on aquatic life. The second wave is a joint project of Coral Sustainable Propagation Program together with the University of Leeds and Love the Oceans. We work on a coral reef in Mozambique to understand what are the dynamics at play there and to be able to repopulate and get this reef in a better health. And then the last aspect, because it would be hypocritical to only look at zinc oxide as a sun filter and forgetting about the global carbon footprint. And while we know that the carbon dioxide is the main reason for global warming, which is the main reason for coral dying. So that is why we have our carbon compensation program. And in the end, this Positive Reef Initiative logo can be used, and this is, for instance, one of our customers who is using that on their sunscreen. So that can be used by our customers so that they can show that they participate in this initiative. And so that it would give a meaning to the end consumer as well, because there are a lot of reef logos out there. Every brand of sunscreen has invented their own logo. And we did not want to be just one logo amongst others, because that is more than just reef safety. That is real proactive initiative. And so we wanted to be able to communicate that to the end consumer. And so that is why we have a very regular posts on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We have a website with important facts about corals, about zinc oxide, so that we are able to communicate to the end user so that when they will purchase the sunscreen and see the logo, they are able to understand what is behind it. So as a conclusion, there is an apparent contradiction on the zinc oxide. On the one hand, you have the impression that it's the best solution against chemical filters. On the other hand, you have the impression that it could be also a potential threat for corals and aquatic life in general. to understand this apparent contradiction, you need to go from a hazard profile to a risk assessment. And when you do that, you see that you do not reach the predicted no effect concentration levels. So it's perfectly safe to use zinc oxide, which is confirmed by measurements. And if you want to go further and take action, then join us with our Positive Reef initiative. That is more than just protecting corals by not damaging them, but it's also a positive creation program. So if you are interested in discussing any of those topics more in detail, of course, please ask your questions now, or you can join us on our booth. We are together with SLE on the booth B14 in Hall 2. Thank you.
Thorsten Görgens. I would like to ask you where your zinc oxide is coming from. Is it from China or is it a source in Europe?
So thank you for that question. So our production of zinc oxide, we are the only zinc oxide producer in Europe. We are producing in the Netherlands, close to Maastricht, and our supplier of raw material is our mother company producing the zinc on the same site as us. So it's a very short supply chain, and we are very close by. So.
Yeah, we just heard in a talk about microbiome this afternoon that zinc oxide is very bad for the microbiome. So do you have any data that maybe the coating does help and not damage the microbiome?
Yes, so indeed, the reason for the activity of zinc oxide on the microbiome will be linked probably to the photocatalytic effect of zinc oxide, which is very reduced compared to titanium dioxide, but still exists. So I don't know in how far it is very bad for the biome, but I would need to look at the results deeper. But basically, if you want to reduce the interactions between zinc oxide and the surrounding elements, you are allowed to, well, it's a good idea indeed to work with a coating. But what I would like to put in perspective is that zinc oxide also has a very well-known soothing effect when you put it on the skin. And that is because most of the skin diseases that you can have, like eczema, etc., can be also linked to a zinc deficiency. Zinc being very needed on the skin for the cell reproduction, the DNA reproduction, and mostly in the skin cells. So we have 2 or 3 grams of zinc, all of us in our body, and this zinc is mainly present on the skin. And so when you have a lack of zinc, it can happen that you have some skin problems, and the topic application of zinc-rich creams, such as the nappy cream, will help prevent that. And it will also have this soothing effect by helping the regeneration of the skin cells. On the microbiome specifically, I'm not so much aware of the impacts, but I know that for skin in general, zinc oxide has a rather positive effect compared to a negative effect.
Thank you for your presentation, Thibault. Do you see a difference in USA? Do you see the company use more zinc oxide in the new formulation of sunscreen?
Absolutely, yes. So there is a general trend in the USA because of this FDA study that showed that only zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are generally regarded as safe and efficient. So some chemical filters are completely formulated out because of their impact on corals, for instance. But also there is, we have a lot of customers who are not completely changing the formula, but increasing the quantity of zinc oxide in the same formula and trying to formulate out 1 or 2 other filters, because here in Europe we have often, our customers often formulate zinc oxide only formulas or zinc oxide together with titanium dioxide. There in the USA, it's most of the cases combination chemical filter with mineral filter. And in this case, so there are 2 effects, indeed, more towards zinc oxide only, and also still hybrid formulas, but with a reduced consumption of chemical and increased zinc oxide. So yes, there is a big trend towards zinc oxide increased consumption in the USA, yes.
Another question on the eco profile. There's some tools around now with the sunscreen simulator from BASF, and the DSM has sunscreen optimizer. And there I was really surprised to see that there's a grade from A to G, I think, for like a refrigerator, the energy and all that. So I put in some normal formulations with few filters, not so high concentration. Then it was like A or B or C. And then with zinc oxide, 20%, it became a G. Yeah. It was really in the red zone. So I guess that's from this hazard profile. So exactly. Is there any intention now from you to kind of, what can you do to change that?
Yeah, so we are in contact with DSM and BASF about their approach. So this matrix that our consultants made for us, we are looking in how far we want to share it with them, because of course they are still competitors. So yeah, but we are in discussion with them to try to understand what are the dynamics that they used to calculate this, specifically taking into consideration everything we have developed and all the scientific data that we have produced that shows that there is really no risk. So that is something that is going on for the moment. We are discussing with them.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you regarding the white cast, if you think it is possible to create a formula with a high SPF for darker skin tones, so not so much of a white cast, using only zinc oxide and boosters and no chemical filters. Do you think is it possible to achieve this?
Yes, I believe it is possible. You will have to, well, I can only talk for my product. So I would choose the most transparent product, so Zano 20 with a coating, 20 plus, to ensure the best spreading in the oil phase. And I would not go too high in concentration. Of course, when I test a product with 25% zinc oxide Zano 20 on my skin, I'm like, wow, it's very transparent. And then you have to, when you test it on a darker skin, you still see the white cast. So you would have to test on your phototype skin, on your target phototype skin, what is the maximum zinc oxide that you can accept in terms of SPF on white cast. So if it's 15, 20, I think 20 should be okay. And then at that moment, you need to start working on the SPF performance. Then you need to think about what type of boosters you wanna add. Certainly not titanium dioxide, because that's a huge refractive index, so that will be very, very white. But you have enough natural boosters. Well, you know them probably as well as me, but you have a lot of natural boosters that you can combine and reach very high SPFs with less than 20% zinc oxide, yes. Absolutely. No more questions? Okay. Thank you.